This is an extended version of a presentation of a lecture that I've held in German language as part of a symposium held at University Clinic Hamburg-Eppendorf, organized by the Medical Voice Center, and it concerned the topic electromagnetic radiation in the human respiratory tract, a research report. This will be a rather long lecture, but I believe well invested lifetime, as you will most likely gain a new perspective unless you are already familiar with the topic, and most likely see the world with different eyes afterwards. Sometimes it is very helpful to take a step back in order to have a better view on, let's say, the big picture. And that's why I want to ask a few basic questions before we start getting into details. These questions might be a little provocative also. Would you eat food on a daily basis knowing that it is possibly carcinogenic? Well, I guess the answer for most of us is probably no. So why is it that in connection to the use of mobile phones, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, etc., we seem to be so incredibly relaxed, or should I rather say ignorant, in respect to the fact that the radiation involved with the use of these technologies has been classified to be possibly cancerogenic by the World Health Organization already back in 2011. You see, this is the statement from an official press release from the International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is part of the World Health Organization, where it says that radio frequency and electromagnetic field has been classified as possibly carcinogenic to humans, so group 2B, based on an increased risk for glioma, a malignant type of brain cancer associated with wireless phone use. And at the point of time back then, in 2011, there were about 5 billion subscribers, so mobile phone users basically registered. So, would you use a technology on a daily basis knowing that it is possibly carcinogenic? Modeled after the look of cigarette packages, I've taken the freedom to design what I would consider an appropriate packaging for a mobile phone, which says mobile phone calls are potentially carcinogenic, because this is essentially what is true. It's not an exaggeration. It just tries to make the user aware of the dangers that are involved potentially. Let's hear a voice of science. This is a statement from a book from Dr. Joseph Mosgöller. The statement is actually by Professor Martin Pall, professor for biochemistry of Washington State University. Setting up tens of millions of 5G antennas without conducting a single biosafety check has to be just about the dumbest idea anyone has had in the course of human history. Because we have to be aware of that human metabolism is based on biochemical and electrical properties of the human cells. A typical nerve cell has a transmembrane potential of about minus 70 millivolts in resting state, which means that the voltage difference between the membrane and the inside of the cell is 70 millivolts. The change from resting state to action state, which is the firing of nerve impulses, involves a transmembrane potential change in the order of about 10 millivolts. Therefore, it might not be such a good idea to impose strong electric or electromagnetic fields on the human cells in the order of several hundred volts per meter or several hundred millivolts per meter squared in terms of radio frequency electromagnetic radiation, field strengths which are common when using mobile phones close to the body, as this will inevitably lead to a disturbance of the cell metabolism with all the consequences involved in the long run. Signals in neurons and muscle cells. This is a text that I've copied from Wikipedia. I just want to give the possibility to interested readers to study that in calm. Now, the voice of a user. I can confirm pain and tingling numbness in my right hand after holding my iPhone 5 for an extended period of time. If I hold the phone in my front right pocket, I also get the same pain and numbness in that leg. I'm afraid we're going to find out in the future that these phones are more harmful than we thought. The same thing happened with cigarettes. It took years for the first people to begin dying from the harmful effects of smoke before consumers realized something was very wrong with the product. This is a statement from an Apple discussion forum, a statement by Soul Brothers 77 back from 2016. And the voice of a realist. Doctors don't understand technology, and technicians don't understand medicine. Politicians and the judiciary understand nothing about either, which is why they rely naively on the information provided by interested industry. I think there are several reasons why we tend to misjudge the potential dangers posed by mobile phone technology. First of all, humans cannot see electromagnetic waves or fields with their own senses, except in the range of visible light, and normally they cannot feel the fields, with the exception of people that suffer of so-called electrosensitivity or electro-hypersensitivity. So basically out of sight, out of mind. Reason number two, I think there is a group dynamic effect. Most people think, well, everyone does it, so it can't be harmful. Well, I think there's a good counterexample. Let's take alcohol consumption. Number three, it is allowed by the state, so it must be okay. After all, there are legally defined limits. Well, I think this is a pretty unjustified argument, since the state also allows clearly harmful cigarette smoking. Number four, and if it were harmful, then we would know about it by now, and it would also show up in the illness or death statistics. Well, the truth is, it actually shows in the statistics. You just have to want to inform yourself and take a look. Anyway, I'm going to show you very soon during the course of this lecture. Number five, the mobile phone industry continues to do everything it can to make us believe that this technology is harmless. But many studies show that this technology is quite dangerous instead. Argument number six, cancer sometimes only appears after 10 years or more. So at first glance, there is no direct connection to the actual cause that we can see. Only if you're electrosensitive will you notice negative effects immediately during or after use of a mobile phone. However, this doesn't mean, conversely, if you're non-sensitive, that the mobile phone radiation does not harm your body or leave traces. You just don't feel it immediately. But it doesn't necessarily have to be cancer. The burden that EMF represents to the human body might even show in the little everyday things that do not show up in the statistics, like a cold that never seems to go away or a chronic bronchitis for which there is no medical explanation. I could show you a graphic like this, which shows chromosome damage, but if you're not a biochemist or involved in genetics, then these photos probably won't mean too much to you. But the statement is from an interview with Professor Mosgöller from University of Vienna, Cancer Research Center, and translated in English, basically he said, when it came to chromosome damage, we were surprised at how clear the result was. I will show you more details about the research that this group did later on. But for the moment, I'd rather show you something that, let's say, is more intuitive for the regular person, and that is, we're going to look at pictures of trees that have been damaged by electromagnetic radiation. What do the trees want to tell us is the title of the front title of this journal, which is published in Germany by diagnosefunk.org. And here we have a closer look, so you can see clearly that of the branches, of some of the branches, the tips of the branches are completely without leaves, while the rest of the tree, kind of survived. This is from an interview, an article concerning the research of Dr. Cornelia Waldmann-Selsam, who did research about 1,500 areas around cell towers. Here are three examples of trees affected by radiation. In the upper left corner, there was a measured radiation of 7.5 milliwatts per meter squared, which also leads to clear baldness of that tree on the side where the radio waves hit first. The other example is right next to it with a radiation value of 95 milliwatts per meter squared. Similar results here. On the lower right side, the photo shows the thinning of leaves with this maple tree exposed to only 3.6 milliwatts per meter squared, but in comparison to the other maple tree here on the left side that has is exposed to much lower radiation, basically 100 times lower. So on the left side you see this is still a healthy tree. On the right side you see the clear effects of the relevantly high radiation. And if you consider that disease in humans sometimes starts already from values as low as 0.1 microwatt per meter squared with UMTS mobile phone technology, this is a statement by medical doctor Cornelia Waldmann-Selsam, then this should really make you think. So to explain things from the ground up, I have included this graphic, which shows that cell towers usually use beam forming. So you have a main beam which carries the main part of the energy here in red, and once the energy diminishes, then we go into the yellow and green and blue and finally light blue region. But I also have to say that the values depicted here are sort of, seen through the pink glasses, I have to say, because as is depicted here in the main beam, they're showing like 5 milliwatts per meter squared. In reality, in the main beam, also according to my own measurements, you will usually have values that are more than 10 times higher. Of course, this depends on how powerful the antenna, the cell tower is that we're talking about. But also, if I step one slide back, you see that easily, like with this tree here, they have been measuring values of 95 milliwatts per meter squared. So this is more the likely dosage of radiation that you will get in the relative vicinity of the main beam of a cell tower. This report is about electromagnetic fields in North Rhine-Westphalia, field measurements in the vicinity of 5G cell towers, carried out by Technical University Aachen and Technical University Ilmenau and other institutions. What was examined here, in principle, the concerned frequency ranges were 410 megahertz to 7.1 gigahertz. And there is a second frequency range that is going to be used with 5G technology that ranges from 24 to roughly 52 gigahertz. What I want to emphasize here is that the vegetation, trees and bushes in between, of course, play a role in terms of also attenuating the electromagnetic field. As wavelength is inversely proportional to frequency, at higher frequencies, even smaller objects, for example, the leaves of trees, are in the order of 1 wavelength, so that they have a significant influence on wave propagation. At millimeter waves, which are the frequencies between 30 and 300 gigahertz, vegetation results in a specific field attenuation of about 4 to 5 dB per meter. And this is not little because if we're talking about power, then already an attenuation of 3 dB essentially means a halving of the power that is arriving at the final destination. Additionally, the penetration depth of electromagnetic waves decreases with increasing frequency, making it more difficult to supply interior areas of buildings. So this is an example of the influence of mobile phone radiation on vegetation. In a case study, somebody tried to make use of vegetation in order to profit from the attenuation of cell tower radiation by a hedge of high-growing bamboo, which normally would grow up to 10 meters height. But unfortunately, under the burden of the electromagnetic field, part of it grew only to a height of 2.5 meters. This is the title of a lecture that I've held in 2023, dealt with some basic measurements concerning electric fields and also electromagnetic fields. And you can find this lecture also on my YouTube channel, FutureSonic 100. I just want to present a few highlights from back then. For example, measuring the electric fields of laptop computers and the power supplies. We see that the power supply alone radiates electric fields in the strength of more than 1000 volts per meter. Actually, this is true also for the much smaller power supplies or chargers that you would use for your mobile phone. That's probably another reason why it's a good idea not to charge your mobile phone overnight in your bedroom, but somewhere outside. And in respect to laptops, you can see in the photo on the left that also there you have relevant strength of electric fields above values of 100 volts per meter. So maybe it's not such a good idea to keep your laptop directly on the lap and working on it for hours and hours, as this electric field will also couple into your body, at least into the lower part of your body where you keep the computer. And this is another thing that I already showed in this lecture back then. It's the radiation that emanates, the electromagnetic field that emanates from in-ear Bluetooth-driven AirPods or in-ear devices, which of course radiate fields that are weaker than if you were having your mobile phone directly close to your head. But nevertheless, the strength is not negligible. We are still talking about 1/4 at least, or 1/3 of the strength of the mobile phone radiation in comparison. So I also want to show you this graphic, which is basically a representation of electromagnetic fields or electromagnetic radiation of different frequency, because I also want to address this lecture of today to people that come with all levels of knowledge concerning this field. So I will explain a few basic things first, but don't worry, later on I'm gonna present also the hardcore scientific stuff, so bear with me and let me ask a few questions at first, maybe sometimes provocative. Let's have a look at this graph, which essentially shows in the middle the part of electromagnetic radiation, which is essentially photons in the form of the visible light. For us humans, visible light is in the range of approximately 380 or 400 nanometers to 700 nanometers wavelength. To the left of it on this graph would be the ultraviolet light, and to the right the infrared light that we also can't see. But you see that the visible spectrum is a very small portion of all the electromagnetic waves and field that is possible in terms of wavelengths. So if we start to the very right-hand side, well, of course, first there's the very low frequency alternating currents and the electromagnetic fields that are connected to it. After that, we are talking about mid-range radio waves, then short-range radio waves, then ultra-shortwave radio frequencies, very high frequency and ultra-high frequency as used in television. After that, you would already have the range of microwave ovens, for example, and radar. Then there's the terahertz radiation, and then already we're getting closer to the range of the visible light photons, infrared. Then comes the visible light spectrum. Then we are having the ultraviolet A, B, and C radiation. After that, we have sort of the heavier stuff, which is X-rays, and even more energetic gamma rays and the cosmic rays that are above that. And of course, wavelengths are getting shorter and shorter as we move more towards the left side of this graphic. This graphic is another one that essentially shows more or less the same things that we have seen before, with typical examples of machines or technical installations that also produce electromagnetic fields in a certain frequency range. Basically the same things. PCs generate electromagnetic radiation. Of course, the mobile phones produce electromagnetic radiation similar in wavelength to microwave ovens and radar, as we have seen before. And then there is X-rays, etc., etc. And basically, you usually divide the whole range of frequencies in non-ionizing radiation and ionizing radiation, which has to do with the fact that connected to a certain wavelength and above that wavelength, the photons have higher energy, which is in the range of 10,000s of electrovolts. And that is what makes the X-rays and the gamma rays so potentially dangerous to humans, and radiation exposure needs to be kept low in order not to do damage. This is another overview that I've also presented in my lecture back then, and let's maybe quickly go through it in order to have a basic understanding of all the frequency ranges that are being used in telecommunication. Starting to the left, what we have already mentioned before, ultra shortwave, very high frequency and ultra high frequency waves that extend up to about 700 megahertz. And then we come already into the region that is relevant for today's mobile phone, cellular phone technology. In green, which is the 800 and 900 megahertz bands, you see that GPRS, which is General Packet Radio Service, UMTS, which stands for Universal Mobile Telecommunication Systems, and LTE are part of making use of this frequency range. Then the next relevant frequency range is at about 1,500 megahertz, which is LTE, long-term evolution. So it's the 4G, fourth generation telephone generation, mobile telephone generation. And then we have the 1,800 megahertz range, which again falls in the category that is marked green in here. Above that, orange is basically what is also being used by LTE and 5G technology. So we might see the use of 5G telephone frequencies in the range of 2.1 gigahertz basically. And above that, at around 2.4 gigahertz, this is the typical frequency that you will find for Wi-Fi, or WLAN, WLAN as we call it in Germany and Austria. Above that, the 3.4 up to 3.7 gigahertz actually. That is, again, frequency range that is being used by 5G. And in the 5 gigahertz region, again used for Wi-Fi at home and in the offices. Now, Dr. Cornelia Waldmann-Selsam reports symptoms of illness which she refers to as the microwave syndrome. The pulsed high-frequency electromagnetic fields of cell towers, wireless, DECT and mobile phones, Wi-Fi, etc. evoke sickness syndromes with characteristic symptom combinations even well below the current permissive power density limits. People suffer under one or more of the following symptoms: sleeplessness, fatigue, headache, pressure on the head, dizziness, restlessness, lightheadedness, irritability, aggressiveness, difficulty concentrating, forgetfulness, word-finding difficulties, depressive mood, lack of motivation, anxiety disorder, panic attacks, burning inside, inner trembling, tinnitus, sudden hearing loss, sensitivity to noise, odors, nosebleeds, dry eyes, visual disturbances, eye sensitivity, eye swelling, eye pain, sensitivity to light, eye inflammation, skin changes like redness, pigmentation, inflammation, circles under the eyes, burning or tingling of the skin, itching, allergic reactions, frequent infections, sinusitis, unclear toothache, jaw suppuration, neck pain, joint and limb pain, nerve and soft tissue pain, muscle cramps, muscle weakness, numbness, paralysis, coordination disorders, cardiac arrhythmias, palpitations, increased blood pressure, might be temporary or permanent, thyroid problems, hair loss, hormonal disorders, loss of libido, metabolic disorders, loss of appetite or permanent feeling of hunger, nausea, weight loss or weight gain, which is a metabolic disorder, chills, night sweats, teeth grinding, and frequent urination. Whoa, this is a really long list. Some people already get sick with a power density as low as 1 microwatt per meter squared. In the case of UMTS technology, this value may even decrease to 0.1 microwatts per meter squared. Remark number 1, these listed symptoms are temporarily and spatially related to exposition to radio frequency EMF, so electromagnetic fields, and 2, most of the people affected were previously free of symptoms. This is what medical doctor Cornelia Waldmann-Selsam reports of her studies. And to go on with the results of her research, residents often become ill after a cell tower is put into operation. Only the time of onset of symptoms varies, immediately, after days, weeks, or months. This depends on the individual's constitution, existing underlying medical conditions, length of stay in the contaminated living space, frequency range, field strength, frequency mix from different directions, and the simultaneous presence of radio and television transmitters. These are by no means subjective health disturbances. Specialist medical examinations have objectively demonstrated cardiac arrhythmias, extreme blood pressure fluctuations, electroencephalogram changes, cerebral circulatory disorders, sudden hearing loss, loss of vision, hormonal disorders, changes in the concentration of neurotransmitters, changes in the concentration of various blood parameters, a rouleau formation, cognitive impairment, and other symptoms. At some sites, also technical installations are disturbed by RF-EMF, like car electronics, garage openers, TV sets, elevators, etc. Changes in the face, skin, and hair were visible to the physician. However, in the first few years after high-frequency exposure, the physicians were unable to find any pathological organ findings that could explain these symptoms. Symptomatic drug therapy, like beta blockers, sleeping pills, antidepressants, psychotropic drugs, anti-rheumatics, anti-hypertensives, eye drops, are of limited benefit. Pharmacists note that these medications are being prescribed frequently around cell tower sites. Most symptoms disappear after exposure is stopped. due to temporary or permanent moving or removing DECT phones or Wi-Fi or using electromagnetic shielding measures, provided no permanent organic damage has occurred. The time until disappearance varies from individual to individual and depends on the previous duration of microwave exposure. So this is a very important paper that examines the global trends in incidence, death, burden, and risk factors of early-onset cancer from 1990 to 2019. And this was actually the main reason why I went into researching the connection between electromagnetic fields and cancer. One of the main statements is outlined here, but I go to the next slide because essentially the condensed information from the abstract is since 1990 the number of incidents and mortality of early onset cancer, which is the age group 14 to 49 years old, has increased significantly worldwide. Early onset breast, tracheal, bronchial, and lung cancer, as well as stomach and colorectal cancer, showed the highest mortality and burden in 2019. Countries with a high middle socio-demographic index and individuals aged 40 to 49 years were particularly affected. Dietary risk factors like a diet high in red meat, low in fruits, high in sodium and low in milk, etc., alcohol consumption and tobacco use were the main risk factors underlying early onset cancers, according to the authors of this paper. Globally, the incidence rates of early onset nasopharyngeal and prostate cancer showed the fastest increasing trend. So here are two graphics which basically display what I have stated before. You see that the breast, prostate, and lung and bronchus cancer are the three types of cancer with the highest both incidence rates and also very high estimated death rates. In terms of estimated deaths, actually the lung and bronchus is the leader here. The graphic on the right side basically is based on the same statistics. Both come from the American Cancer Society. The difference here is that these are not absolute numbers, but they are relative numbers per 100,000 inhabitants. Sorry, there is a zero is missing here. And it's age-adjusted data. Also from the paper, I have extracted these two graphs. The one on the left side concerns the main factors that have been identified to be of relevance for the incidence of colorectal cancers. And we see that the authors have listed 11 factors at all. They have changed the order of importance in respect to when we compare the year cancer statistics 1990 to the cancer statistics 2019. So the correlation to the incidence of cancer apparently has changed per factor. On the right-hand side, we see that only 3 factors have been identified to be relevant and correlated to the incidence of tracheal, bronchus, and lung cancer, and they have not changed their order. So the most important factor, according to the authors, for the incidence of these types of cancers is tobacco, which is, of course, not a big surprise. Second most important factor should be a diet low in fruits, and the third most important factor is high fasting plasma glucose. But what has not been considered in this study is one other environmental factor that I would personally consider to be of importance, and that is radio frequency electromagnetic fields. And if we take a look at the age-standardized incidence of early-onset cancer per 100,000 inhabitants for the year 2019, so the last year of the study, then this is the picture that we get. It's basically the United States which have the highest rate per 100,000 inhabitants, so more than 250 people out of 100,000 inhabitants have cancer. And we see that the second group ranges from 120 to 250 people per 100,000 inhabitants having cancer. So we see that mainly large parts of Europe fall into this group. Canada falls into that group. Australia as well as New Zealand fall into that group. And then the next one would be the yellowish regions, which again is part of Europe, Spain and Portugal over here, part of South America, the whole of Russia, the whole of China. And the least affected group, according to the statistics, is basically almost Africa as a whole. So if you try to remember the most affected countries here, like the United States and Europe and Australia and New Zealand, and carry that image or memory over to the next slide, which is a display of the launch of 5G mobile technology in the years 2019 to 2023, you see that 5G implementation happened mainly in the United States, in basically the whole of Europe, as we can say, largest parts of China and relevant parts of Asia, and of course also in the well-inhabited, densely inhabited parts of Australia and New Zealand and in India. So if you compare these two images, the one that we have seen before in terms of incidence of cancer and the distribution or density of 5G mobile phone technology, I think this should ring a bell. A timeline, just for completeness, in which years 5G has been introduced in these various countries. Now you might think, okay, before we have been shown the incidence of cancer up to 2019, and now we're just taking a look at 5G deployment in the period of 4 years that come after. So what does one thing have to do with the other? Well, simple reason why I'm showing you these two graphs is because, of course, mobile phone technology obviously has not been introduced to all the regions that are highlighted here only after 2019. But the truth is, of course, that it is exactly these industrialized countries that already 20 years before, more or less, have had the economic power and the technology to install what was state of technique back then in terms of mobile phone technology. So if we take a look at the world coverage of GSM or 3G technology back in 2007, then we actually get a quite similar picture, again with North America being very well covered. The same goes here for Europe. And again, India, China, the densely inhabited parts of Australia, New Zealand, and also large parts of Brazil, for example. So it is clear that from the start of implementation of mobile phone technology in these countries, the effects of electromagnetic fields and radiation would have their impact on the population. So if we want to compare again or have a look at the detail, on the left-hand side, again, the picture concerning North America, mainly the United States, the 5G implementation there, and on the right-hand side, the incident rates by state, in this case of the USA, then I think it is quite clear that there is a connection or a correlation between the density of implementation of mobile phone technology that we can see on the left-hand side and a clearly higher rate of incidence per 100,000 inhabitants of the states as pictured on the right-hand side. For correctness, it needs to be said that, of course, a purely geographical correlation between the mobile phone network density and the cancer incidence is only a first indication, but does not necessarily imply a causal relationship. But as I'm trying to point out through what the papers that I'm going to present to you through the rest of the lecture, I think it becomes pretty clear that there is a factual connection between these two. So, for completeness, let's also name other factors that promote the occurrence of cancer. It might be all kind of adverse environmental factors like exposure to chemicals, microplastics, etc., air pollution in the form of nanoparticles or particulate matter. Also, of course, electric, magnetic, and electromagnetic fields. This is something that I have added to the list because all the other things listed here have taken from the paper by Zhao, the one main paper on global trends in incidence, death burden, and risk factors of early onset cancer. Other adverse factors are poor eating habits, so basically malnutrition in terms of vitamins or minerals, and also obesity, and negative lifestyle in the form of lack of sleep, overwork, stress at work, smoking, and alcohol consumptions. So, according to the authors of the paper, the main relevant factors, the main correlating factors for tracheal bronchus and lung cancer were tobacco. So, according to the authors of the paper, this most relevant rise in incidence of tracheal bronchus and lung cancer that happened between 1990 and 2019 would be mainly due to tobacco use as a first primary factor. But if we take a look at the statistics in terms of tobacco consumption, here in the United States, for example, we have actually a declining percentage of smokers from 1999 to 2019, from about 27% to 16%. So if we go even back further, back in the 1950s, we had almost half of the population in the half of the adults in the United States declaring themselves as smokers. Fortunately, these rates have steadily moved down over the years. So in the 1990s, here we have only about 1/3 of the adults declaring themselves to be smokers, and that value has even halved up until 2019. We see that it's only something like 16%. I would argue that tobacco can't really be the main reason for a rise in tracheal, broncho, and lung cancer then, if effectively the number of smokers has dropped and halved during that period of time. So I thought, okay, if it's not tobacco, then maybe it could be air pollution in general. So I accessed the relevant statistics in this respect, but it turned out there is a globally declining trend in the number of deaths due to air pollution between 1990 and 2019. Interestingly, the outdoor particulate matter stays more or less constant, but the indoor air pollution, there's a clear drop in terms of percentage. Combined together, air pollution total, this still results in a clearly declining trend. So again, air pollution also can't be a relevant factor for the rise of incidence of tracheal, bronchial, and lung cancer. So for me, there is an unexplained discrepancy in the conclusion of Zhao et al. Regarding the main risk factor, smoking, with a real decline in smokers. And also the sharp decline in the number of deaths due to air pollution between 1990 and 2019. And my conclusion is that there must be another factor for the high number of cases or increase in nasopharyngeal, tracheal, bronchial, and lung cancer that was not considered as a plausible cause in the analysis by Zhao et al. And that missing factor, which I would attribute to be the main factor and main cause for the incidence of this type of cancers, is the exposure to electromagnetic fields in the form of mobile phones, Wi-Fi, and cell tower radiation. As we have seen, the electromagnetic fields have been classified as possibly carcinogenic to humans. And there are, in the meantime, already some significant scientific studies that even suggest the classification of mobile phone radiation as probably carcinogenic, which would mean category 2A. Just an example, I have listed the following study. To give you an overview, since 2011, the following 6 meta-analyses have reported on the associations between mobile phone use and the risk of brain tumors or head and neck tumors, mainly gliomas and salivary gland tumors. Now, I'm not going to read all the titles of these papers, but I'm very happy to give you these references, which you hopefully will be able to dig up yourself if interested. And let me say this about the biological damage caused by non-ionizing radiation. This is something I've taken from a brilliant paper by Cindy L. Russell, which is on 5G wireless telecommunications expansion, public health and environmental implications. A growing body of scientific literature documents evidence of non-thermal cellular damage from non-ionizing wireless radiation used in telecommunications. This RF-EMR has been shown to cause an array of adverse effects on DNA integrity, cellular membranes, gene expression, protein synthesis, neuronal function, the blood-brain barrier, melatonin production, sperm damage, and immune dysfunction, which is backed by the results in the studies papers that are listed in gray below. Here you find the complete literature references to these papers. Other possible effects of wireless signal transmission on human health that are named in the paper by Russell are infertility, neurodegenerative changes, and brain cancer. So again, here the list of the relevant papers that she's referring to. A note about electrosensibility and electrohypersensitivity. In addition, electrosensitivity to wireless and electrical devices is being increasingly recognized by scientists and physicians. An increasing number of people are reporting a variety of symptoms with exposure to wireless devices and infrastructure, including headaches, insomnia, dizziness, nausea, lack of concentration, heart palpitations, and depression. The World Health Organization also recognizes fatigue, tiredness, and digestive disturbances as part of the effects related to electrohypersensitivity. And also very interesting, the prevalence of electrosensitivity reaches approximately 1.5% in Sweden, 3% in Germany, which is already 2.4 million people, and values up to more than 13% in Taiwan. Here again, the literature references. And I've copied out from the World Health Organization webpage part of what they write on electrohypersensitivity. Basically this is the list that I've already included in the slides before. The studies listed so far and their clear results have all been known for at least 10 years or longer, if you look at the dates given of the various papers that I have presented before. Has the legislature or the mobile communications industry taken these into account in any way, for example, by tightening the limits or voluntarily reducing radiation exposure? No, instead, the reality is that these symptoms of electrosensitivity are already known since 1981. So by more than 40 years by now. It is notable that these same symptoms were described in military personnel working near radar communication systems. A 1981 NASA report, Electromagnetic Field Interactions, Observed Effects and Theories, by Jeremy Rains, described microwave sickness with a host of symptoms recorded, including headaches, eye strain, fatigue, dizziness, disturbed sleep at night, sleepiness in daytime, moodiness, irritability, unsociability, hypochondriac reactions, feelings of fear, nervous tension, mental depression, memory impairment, pulling sensation in the scalp and brow, loss of hair, pain in muscles and heart region, breathing difficulties, and increased perspiration of extremities. So I think that it is most relevant to bear in mind that the consequences that electromagnetic radiation can have on humans are known already for a long time and have been known well before the decision had been taken to implement mobile phone technology on a large scale. Now I want to come to more details concerning human tissue and electromagnetic radio frequency fields. Here, the so-called relative permeability and conductivity values are displayed that can be measured for different tissues of the human body and also for bone at three of the most relevant frequencies being used in telecommunications, namely 900 megahertz, 1800 megahertz, and 2.4 gigahertz. From another rather important paper in that field, here's a list of the relative permittivity for various tissues listed on the left-hand side: white and gray matter of the brain, fat, kidney, liver, lung, muscle, and also the various parts of the eye has been examined in this respect, very detailed for a number of frequencies that are being used also for therapeutic reasons. But there is also the 915 megahertz range, which would be relevant for mobile phone technology, for example. And it's very interesting to note that actually there are also already very early publications in the field of dielectric properties of tissues and fluids that range back to the 1920s, as you can see, and the 1930s. Obviously, we also have to come to a brief examination of the so-called SAR values, SAR, for a specific absorption rate, which most of you will know in respect to the mobile phone, where the mobile phone manufacturers have to specify the SAR rates for their products. So there are limits of permissive SAR rates. In Europe, these are 2 watts per kilogram of head and torso, with the effects of basically the mobile phone radiation on the head and torso. 4 watts per kilogram are permissive as radiation in relation to extremities like arms and legs. It is another interesting fact, though, that the FCC itself notes in the OET Bulletin 65 that devices that operate above 6 gigahertz, with, for example, millimeter wave devices, localized specific absorption rate is not an appropriate means for evaluating exposure. At these higher frequencies, exposure from portable devices should be evaluated in terms of power density MPE limits instead of SAR. So that basically means that for the frequency ranges that are now becoming more and more important in relation to newly implemented 5G technology, which uses a lot of frequency bands above 5 gigahertz, the SAR values that we're using now as limits basically become meaningless. They are not an appropriate measure anymore, as has finally been understood. But I'm afraid it will still need some time that legislation or regulations are going to take this into account. Also in Europe, there is no uniform specific absorption rate regulation. Like here on the left-hand side, with this iPhone, there are again SAR limits noted of 1.6 watts per kilogram. Basically, what is the maximum transmission power that we find implemented in today's mobile phones? So this depends on the frequency band. For example, in the 1800 megahertz band, this might be up to 1 watt of effective power. And in the 900 megahertz band, instead, even up to 2 watts of power that the mobile phone can radiate. And I have recently done a measurement to see how mobile phone behaves in a kind of Faraday cage. So basically, I stepped into an elevator. You can see the board of the elevator here. And going up and down, I measured the electric field where the values went up to 1000 volts per meter, which can be seen in the display here in the top left. The magnetic field strength that was measured in parallel was up to 14 milligauss, and the electromagnetic power density, which is displayed here on the lower part of the display, was up to 1004 milliwatts per meter squared, so essentially 1 watt per meter squared. So this coincides completely with what has been stated before in terms of radiation power that a mobile phone, in this case it's an Apple iPhone that you can see here in the background, radiates. Now, for a more detailed analysis, I want to show you a graphic from this paper by Cavagnaro et al. From 2013, Evaluation of the Electromagnetic Power Absorption in Humans Exposed to Plane Waves. So what we see on the left side is a simulation of the penetration depth depending on frequency. On the left-hand side for the 900 megahertz band or frequency, and on the right-hand side for a frequency of 5 gigahertz. And you see, according to this kind of rainbow color scaling, that on the outer parts of the body, of course, you find the highest amount of burden or field strength. And of course, to the inside, then the absorption of the radiation through the bodily tissues becomes effective. But what is quite interesting to see, in my opinion, is that the penetration depth is actually relevantly higher at the higher frequency of 5 gigahertz, because you can see this especially with the legs, for example, and also with the arms. And just for interest, I have also calculated and inserted to this graphic some values for the size of wavelength lambda in relation to the frequency concerned. So at 900 megahertz, we have a lambda of 33 centimeters. And as we go higher, of course, the length of lambda diminishes. At 5 gigahertz, it's only like 6 centimeters, and with higher frequencies that are being already partly used for 5G applications, you might arrive at very short wavelengths in the range of just 0.5 centimeters at 60 gigahertz, for example. And also to give you an idea of what you're seeing on the right side, an attenuation of 20 dB here basically corresponds to an attenuation to 1/100th of the original value. Now I would like to introduce you to the virtual family. These are 8 members of the virtual family. They are not genetically related to each other though, but it is real people that have been used for this study. In order to be able to make a correct simulation of their body, these people have been subject to MRI scans in order to have the appropriate sizes of their organs and skeleton, etc. And I'm going to show you some results from this paper by Bakker et al. Assessment in induced SAR in children exposed to electromagnetic plane waves between 10 megahertz and 5.6 gigahertz. So basically what is shown here is that when you sweep through the range of 10 megahertz to up to 5,600 megahertz, so basically 5.6 gigahertz, we see that there are actually two electrical resonant frequencies with the human body. So the first electrical resonance frequency is in the range between about 70 to 120 megahertz. Of course, where the exact peak resonance lies depends on the body size and construction. But you see an overall trend here. And the second electrical resonance frequency is between 2 and 2.4 gigahertz. If we quickly take a look at the second resonant frequency, it is really sort of a misfortunate fact that the Wi-Fi that you will usually find at home or at the office operates exactly at that frequency, 2.4 gigahertz, where our bodies are susceptible to resonate. So in comparison, if you have a choice between using 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, then according to this graphic, it might actually be a better idea to use the 5 gigahertz frequency. So what could be seen on the graphic before is that the SAR values for some members of the virtual family were exceeded by up to 45% at the second resonant frequency. I will quickly step back. You can see that here is the basic restriction as formulated by the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radio Protection, and 4 of the 8 members actually exceed this basic restriction at the second resonant frequency. So Thelonious is especially affected due to his smaller body size. Okay, let's have a look at some other papers which are quite relevant in relation to what we're talking about today, electromagnetic frequencies and cancer. This paper by Lerchel et al., tumor promotion by exposure to radio frequency electromagnetic fields below exposure limits for humans. In 2015, Lerchel et al. Replicated the results of an earlier study by Tillman et al. From 2010 and were able to confirm their findings. Groups of almost 100 mice each, which were injected with a cancer-provoking substance, were irradiated with different high RF-EMF doses of 0.04, 0.4 and 2 watts per kilogram, as well as a control group without irradiation, of course. The result was a statistically significant increased incidence of lung and liver cancer, as well as lymphomas. Since a direct correlation with the level of radiation dose could not be found, the researchers suspect relevant changes in the mice metabolism caused by the radiation dose. Alarmingly, the increased cancer rates were observed at radiation levels below the permissible limit for humans. Furthermore, it was shown that RF-EMF radiation at low doses, in that case 0.08 watts per kilogram, caused an increase in body weight in hamsters, indicating a change in body metabolism. So this, I think, is also an important statement from that paper, because it makes me think that when I see especially young people which have suffer of extreme obesity, then to myself I often think if this might be related to them reacting in an adverse way to too much exposure to electromagnetic fields of their mobile phones, for example, or the Wi-Fi, that they're at times surrounded by 24/7, because it's the usual scenario today that you have Wi-Fi on at home, you have Wi-Fi on at the office, and hardly ever people switch it off. At best, if they care, at night times. But for the rest of the day, you almost for sure will be exposed to one or more Wi-Fi routers in your vicinity. So these are some graphics from the paper that I've just cited. You see that the highest rates of bronchoalveolar adenoma and carcinoma are actually with the lower rates of 400 milliwatts per kilogram, and here also of only the 40 milliwatts per kilogram, and lower percentage with the higher dosage of RF-EMF of 2 watts per kilogram. And similar things apply for the hepatocellular carcinoma and also for the lymphomas. Now I would want to present one of the results of my own measurements. As we have seen before, the penetration depth of the electromagnetic radiation is therefore not only dependent on the power density, but also on the frequency of the EMF and the associated wavelength lambda. However, when studying the literature, one gets the impression that the radiation only penetrates a few millimeters into the upper layers of the skin and is thus almost completely absorbed or attenuated. However, this is not the case with direct physical contact with the EMF transmitter, for example the cell phone, since the EMF radiation is coupled directly into the human body, and this is thus essentially converted into an antenna. The test showed that the attenuation of the EMF signal between coupling into the human body via the right hand, as shown here in the photo above the mobile phone, to coupling out from the body via the left hand into the measurement device, is only approximately 15 to 23 dBm, which corresponds to an attenuation factor of 20 in respect to the peak values, or 200 if you average the signal. It is possible that a similar mechanism comes into play in the human body, such as the so-called skin effect, which is known from electrical engineering with regard to the surface conduction of electrons in high-frequency alternating current. And in that respect, in order to underline what I've just said before, that your human body becomes an antenna effectively if you have direct contact to your mobile phone, I want to cite this study by medical doctor De-Kun LI. He did a lot of research in respect to mobile phones contributing to the rise in early-onset colorectal cancer, pancreas and stomach cancer. And what is stated here in German, so I'm going to quickly translate this, is that the connection between the carrying of mobile phones and the position where the tumor establishes is that there's a clear correlation between the side where you hold or carry the mobile phone and where the tumor develops. So for completeness, I'm also showing the poster in which De-Kun LI first presented the results of his research with the title, "Is Cell Phone Carrying Below the Waist Exposure to Non-Ionizing Radiation Contributing to the Rapid Rise in Early-Onset Colorectal Cancer?" I would also like to add at this point that it is a known fact at the oncology department in hospitals that in the case of men with testicular cancer, the cancer is usually found on the side where the mobile phone is carried in the trouser pocket. I just want to quickly present to you the kind of title picture of another short video clip of mine that you can find on my YouTube channel FutureSonic 100, in which I've demonstrated that the human body can be quite effective as a transmitting antenna. As I'm putting my electronic car key close to the lower jaw in order to couple it more directly to the body and therefore achieve a larger transmission distance, effective transmission distance. Yes, I really managed to open and close the doors of this white car that you see at the end of the street, despite the rather relevant distance between me and the car. Now I want to show you another example of the human body being effectively an antenna, willing or not. I'm almost certain that you have always wanted to know how your body sounds electrically. And therefore, I'm going to play to you this little recording that I did in my garden. So I'm pretty convinced that you would also sound similar to what you've just heard if I attached the recording cable to your body, if you were standing in my garden as well. And here is a graphical representation of what we have just heard in the form of a spectrogram. Along the x-axis, I display about 1/10 of a second, 100 milliseconds, of the sound that we have just heard, and along the y-axis frequency is displayed starting from 0 hertz at the bottom going up to 48 kilohertz at the top. This is of course way beyond the frequency range that we can hear, which usually ends at best at 20 kilohertz. But I would like to go on to black and white display of basically the same data, because here things are more easily visible. And you can see that around 8 kilohertz, for example, and 20 kilohertz, and here around 24 kilohertz, and again more or less below 48 kilohertz, you can see clear structures and signs of constant amplitude of these frequencies. So apart from the fact that what we've heard before is of course a mishmash of several frequencies in parallel, but as we can see from this visual analysis, there are distinct single frequencies that stick out more in terms of amplitude. And unfortunately, at the moment I have no idea what these 8 kilohertz and 20 kilohertz and probably around 24 and 48 kilohertz amplitudes are related to. But this is just what came out of the analysis of my body antenna body recording. So let's have a look at another paper in relation to EMF and cancer. Brain tumors rise in glioblastoma multiforme incidence in England from 1995 to 2015 suggests an adverse environmental or lifestyle factor, a paper by Phillips et al. And if we take a look at one of the graphs here, the study by Phillips et al. Shows a linear, strong, and statistically highly significant increase in primary glioblastoma multiforme tumors over a 21-year period from 1995 to 2015, particularly in the frontal and temporal lobes of the brain. Although most cases occur in the age group over 54 years, the age-standardized increase is statistically highly significant in all 3 main age groups in this analysis, which is not displayed here in the graph. But the increase in age-standardized incidence cannot be fully explained by improved diagnostics over the years, as it affects specific brain areas and only one type of brain tumor, which is usually fatal. The authors of that paper suggest that widespread environmental or lifestyle factors may be responsible, and I cite, although these findings do not provide additional evidence for the role of any specific risk factor. But my suspicion is, again, the exposure to cell phone radiation, obviously due to the usually rather close position of the mobile phones to the brain. Another paper that, as I would argue, points in the same direction is this one by Karlberg et al. From 2020. Is the increased incidence of thyroid cancer in the Nordic countries caused by use of mobile phones? And as outlined in the last sentence of the abstract, we postulate that RF radiation is a causative factor for the increased thyroid cancer incidence. But let's have a closer look to some of the details. What we see here in the graphic is the incidence per 100,000 inhabitants. Thyroid cancer concerning women of the Nordic countries, including Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Iceland. What is pictured is the development of thyroid cancer from 1970 to 2016, but we can see here that from approximately 2005 onwards, there is a steep increase in terms of incidence. So effectively, in these years, 2005 to 2016, the rate has more or less doubled, I would say, from 4.5 to above 8 cases per 100,000 people. If we take a look at the analogous statistic concerning men in the Nordic countries, we see that the increase is not as steep, but again, we can note here almost a doubling of the cases from what seems to be around 1.4 or 1.5 of almost up to 3 cases per 100,000 inhabitants. A relatively short latency period has been observed for ionizing radiation-induced thyroid cancer, with the risk increasing 5 to 10 years after irradiation. The sharp increase in thyroid cancer incidence could therefore be radiation-induced, most likely due to RF radiation from mobile phones. Notably, Luo et al. Also found an increased risk in the shortest latency period of smaller than 13 years. And the author's conclusion is that the incidence of thyroid cancer has increased significantly in Sweden and all Nordic countries in the 21st century. Mobile phone use is increasing, and smartphones in particular expose the thyroid to high levels of radiofrequency radiation. This is suspected to be a causal factor in the rising incidence, supported by human epidemiology, which has demonstrated an association between mobile phone use and thyroid cancer. The military knows more. Most of you will have heard of the so-called Havana syndrome. Already quite some time back that US diplomats in Havana on Cuba have experienced strange symptoms which were attributed to the potential use of millimeter electromagnetic radiation, like headaches, nausea, visual disturbances. It's a technique that presumably has also been used against personnel of the embassy in Moscow, for example. And in the last section down here, it is also reported in US media like The Insider, 60 Minutes, and Spiegel, that also Russia, of course, has developed microwave weapons that could cause Havana syndrome. Also in the Ukraine war, according to magazine Standard, millimeter wave weapons are in use on both sides, Russians and Ukrainians, that might disturb the signals of drones. Now, in connection to that, it can be said that the US Department of Defense knows only too well that millimeter waves can cause pain, as it uses these extremely high frequencies in weapon systems such as the Active Denial System, ADS, which is used for crowd control. The ADS can cause an intense burning sensation that feels as if the skin is on fire. People exposed to the ADS radiation therefore instinctively flee. And how does the ADS work? The working principle of the active denial system is similar to that of a microwave oven. Just as a microwave has a magnetron that emits microwaves and heats the food kept inside, the VMATS system consists of a gyrotron that emits millimeter waves at a frequency of 95 gigahertz with the help of a reflector, as is pictured here in the graphic. And here we see practical implementation in the form of a military tank that was developed for use in the Afghanistan war. And what we can read below here is that the ADS works by firing a high-powered 100 kilowatt output power beam of 95 gigahertz waves at the target, which corresponds to a wavelength of 3.2 millimeter. Yeah, one significant difference to the microwave oven is though that the micro oven uses a much lower frequency of only 2.45 gigahertz. So again, this is the same frequency that is being used by our Wi-Fi at home or at the office. As is written in this information from which I've taken from Wikipedia, the short millimeter waves used in ADS only penetrate the top layers of skin, with most of the energy being absorbed within 0.4 millimeters or 1/64th inch, whereas microwaves with a longer wavelength will penetrate into human tissue about 17 millimeters or 0.67 inch. Now, one of the last things I would like to show you is the transmission power as used with downtown cell towers, in this case here in Salzburg, Austria, of this particular station here, carries 3 different stations. Station number 1, which is not listed here, has a wattage of 260. Station number 2 has a transmission power of 360 to 380 watts, uses GSM LTE and 5G protocols, and station number 3 has a power of 560 to 580 watts. So combined, these 3 stations, which are physically more or less at the same position, we arrive at a total wattage of 1220 watts or 1.2 kilowatts. So one may ask, does the factor of 100 already determine between good and bad? Good being the cell towers for mobile phone use downtown, as opposed to the active denial system that uses 100 kilowatts. I'm asking this also in relation to the next graphic that I'm going to show you. What we see here in this graphic is the typical maximum daily exposure to artificial electromagnetic fields compared to natural background radiation, which is pictured in green below. And this natural radiation exposure in green, to which all living beings are evolutionarily adapted, has increased millionfold due to the technologically generated exposure, which is depicted in yellow and red color for the 1950s, the 1980s, and the 2010s. And we see that even industrial limits will soon be exceeded, as here in the 1 gigahertz region, we are almost touching on the 1 watt per meter squared range. Now let's come to the conclusion. Since 1990, the number of incidence and mortality of early-onset cancer, age group 14 to 49 years, has increased significantly worldwide. Early-onset breast, tracheal, broncho, lung, and stomach and colorectal cancer showed the highest mortality and burden in 2019. Globally, the incident rates of early-onset nasopharyngeal and prostate cancer showed the fastest increasing trend. Dietary risk factors, alcohol consumption, and tobacco consumption are identified in the study by Zhao et al. As the main risk factors for early-onset cancer, but due to the significant decline in tobacco consumption and the sharp decline in deaths due to air pollution during the period under study, they cannot plausibly explain the increase in nasopharyngeal cancer. As I've shown by analyzing the results of the various papers cited above, during the course of this presentation, following the worldwide introduction and increased use of mobile phone technology from the mid-1990s onwards, a wide range of negative effects on humans, animals, and plants, including various types of cancer, have been demonstrated under laboratory conditions as well as in involuntary open field tests, which means real-life, everyday conditions that we live in, surrounded by radio frequency EMF. Due to the close proximity to the nasopharynx in all 3 possible scenarios of mobile phone use, which are phone call scenario on the left-hand side with a mobile phone in a very conservative position right next to your ear and your head, the SMS message writing scenario, which is number 2 in the middle here with the mobile phone close to your chest, And the third scenario, the browsing scenario, where you might have your mobile phone close to the abdomen, as well as the dielectric nature, meaning that the mucous membranes are always moist, of the relevant respiratory organs, which are the nasopharynx, trachea, bronchi, and lungs. These seem to be particularly susceptible to the negative effects of electromagnetic radiation, which is clearly reflected in the increased cancer rates since 1990. Beyond the use of personal mobile phones, people are generally exposed to the elevated levels of EMF radiation in today's urban working environment, as there is just as little that can be done against Wi-Fi radiation from neighboring offices or apartments, at least according to current legislation, as against the ubiquitous radiation from cell towers, GPS satellite systems, tetra radios of the authorities, radar, digital terrestrial and satellite television, etc., etc. I would also like to make some recommendation, because what can be done on an individual basis in order to reduce radiation exposure for the sake of your own health to a necessary minimum, it seems advisable to, number one, better to work with a wired Ethernet cable in the office or at home, which means a LAN connection instead of a wireless LAN or Wi-Fi. Number two, when you're on the go, do not have Wi-Fi and mobile data switched on all the time, but check your new messages, social media, etc. only every 2 to 3 hours. Because your immediate reachability is anyway granted for both calls and text messages via SMS, and it does not require you to be constantly online via WhatsApp, email, etc., or mobile data outdoors, or Wi-Fi. It is better not to carry your mobile phone directly on your body, in your trouser pocket, etc., even in standby mode, when it is ready to receive messages, but at least in a shoulder bag as far away from your body as possible. Suggestion number 3, if necessary, do without 5G technology, as the transmitting stations use beamforming technology, which means higher radiation exposure for the user. Number 4, avoid smart home solutions, which result in a virtually uncontrollable, almost constant radiation exposure. Recommendation number 5, use traditional wired headphones or headsets instead of AirPods wireless headsets that use Bluetooth technology. Number 6, likewise, when working on a computer, use a wired keyboard and mouse instead of wireless Bluetooth-based input devices. Number 7, due to exposure to electrical and electromagnetic fields, do not use laptops, tablets, etc. directly on your lap or close to your body, but, if possible, at a minimum distance of 20 to 30 centimeters from your body. Number 8, when using a mobile phone in the office or at home in standby reception mode, it is better not to just place it at arm's length, but to keep it at a distance of 2 to 3 meters, which would be 6 to 10 feet more or less from your body. Number 9, for the sake of your own health, it is better to switch your phone to flight mode in all locations which are Faraday cages, which means enclosed metallic spaces like airplanes, trains, buses, cars, and elevators, because otherwise they are very likely to radiate at full power. As an outlook, what could the government and the telecom companies do to improve the situation? First of all, national roaming. Instead of competing telecom companies providing and using several mobile telephony networks in parallel, which is not only inefficient but also causes a heavier burden in terms of electromagnetic radiation for the population. Number 2, glass fiber. As the best solution for high-speed internet access, has been proposed already 20 years ago, but as it is rather costly to install, many telecom companies have chosen the wireless path whenever possible. For mobile phones, this is of course inevitable, but for internet access in the offices and at home, a wired solution, glass fiber or copper, is for sure the healthier option. Number 3, Li-Fi instead of Wi-Fi. Light fidelity uses the infrared light band, invisible for the human eye, to transmit data. In contrast to Wi-Fi, it requires an undisturbed line of sight between the router and the end device, which would be the laptop or mobile phone, which can easily be achieved with appropriate installation. It has the added advantage that the waves do not penetrate walls and the information transmitted is therefore tap-proof. Number 4, all devices which communicate with the internet or via a network mandatorily have to have a wired port, a LAN or USB, for the data connection. Of course, in addition to wireless connection features. Suggestion number 5, all wireless devices, Wi-Fi, etc., mandatorily have to have a physical on-off switch for their wireless function, as well as the possibility to easily regulate their output power, in order that the user can effortlessly adapt the necessary transmitting power of the device in order to keep RF-EMF burden as low as possible for himself and the neighborhood. This would, for example, make it very easy to just switch off your Wi-Fi at night. Number 6, the public at large has to be well informed about the potential dangers when using devices which use RF-EMF technology. Only in this way people can make informed decisions on whether to or to which amount use this technology or not. Number 7, after more than 20 years of worldwide mobile phone usage, the devastating physical as well as psychological impact, especially on kids and youth, have become very clear in the form of increasing rates of depression, anxiety, suicide, isolation, and learning concentration difficulties. The graphic on the left side also displays the related information from this book by Jonathan Haidt with the title The Anxious Generation, published in 2024. It is therefore rather clear that society has to install more rigid rules in order to protect the upcoming generations. Current suggestions are that adolescents should get their first smartphone not before the age of 14 and should not be able to access social media and have their own account or profile before the age of 16. This may sound like an extremist proposal at first, but currently various governmental institutions in Europe are considering adopting corresponding regulations. Number 8. There is an increasing percentage of people who suffer from electrohypersensitivity. Depending on a specific country, the rate is between 2% and more than 13%, as we have seen. In many countries, EHS is neither officially recognized as an illness nor that its incidence is related to electric, magnetic, or electromagnetic radiation. Electrohypersensitivity must be recognized as an environmentally related disease, and the protection of the minority affected by it must be respected through appropriate legislation. Number 9. Accordingly, protection zones for persons affected by EHS must be established in public spaces, analogous to non-smoking zones and accessibility for people with disabilities. This must also apply to public buildings, hospitals, and local and long-distance public transport. Low radiation residential and recreational areas must be publicly funded and conceptually supported. Number 10. My home is my castle. Analogous to the protection of nighttime quiet, which is normally between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m., during which no noise may be generated in private areas that could disturb neighbors, there is a need for legal regulation that prevents EMF radiation from penetrating neighboring apartments. Because during the night, important repair processes take place in the human body at the biochemical level, which are disrupted by external fields and thus hinder the body's normal recovery. This also has to do with the right to the integrity of one's own body. Number 11. Since the adverse effects of RF-EMF on humans, but also animals and plants, have been proven through various research, both in the laboratory as well as in the open field, protection measures are due, not least because our own food chain is at risk. There is, for example, the risk of the extinction of bees. Therefore, the number of cell towers as well as the power intensity of RF-EMF radiation has to be significantly reduced. And number 12, the legal basis for this must be the adjustment, essentially the reduction, of legally permissible radio frequency, electromagnetic frequency radiation dose, the value of which must be sharpened on the basis of the newly acquired scientific findings, which are now more than ever available in considerable detail and in abundance. So finally, I wanted to give you this list of web links relevant for the further study of yours. Also, I would recommend the viewing of this great documentary video by Klaus Scheidsteger, The Digital Dilemma, which is available in 4 languages, English, German, French, and Italian, and a list of websites where you can acquire products for protection against RF-EMF. This list of web links can also be accessed in the text section below the video. So now I'm at the end of my presentation, and I want to thank you for your interest. If you found it interesting, then please leave a thumbs up. And of course, I would be happy if you also decided to subscribe to my YouTube channel, FutureSonic 100. Thank you very much.